Hello, everyone. We will be first off having our NAPLEX gem session, and I will shortly turn it over to Libby to go ahead and get us started and kick us off. But I do want to draw your attention to the link that will be dropped in the chat. We will be using the Poll Everywhere software just to gauge some question and answers throughout the presentation. So if you can just pull that up, you can use your cellular device or you can use your computer. It doesn't really matter which one, but you'll just want to have that pulled up on the back end of this. So I have dropped that in the chat. Let me know if that link does not work, but it should. And you should see one question that we will reference in a bit, but just give everyone a moment to pull that up. And then I will go ahead and pass it on over to Libby once you're ready. I don't see anything in the chat that no one can everyone should be able to access the link. So,
all right. Thank you, Carson. And thank you for Pills for inviting me to chat with you all tonight. Very honored to be here, drop some gems, and hopefully alleviate some of the concerns that you all have as well. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Libby Shelton, PharmD or PH. I'm a PharmD graduate from Purdue University. As of last May, it's crazy to think that a year ago I was in your position. Right now, I am the inaugural Oncology Training and Development Fellow with Rutgers Pharmaceutical Industry Fellowship, and I work specifically with Daiichi Sankyo. And then I am the CEO and founder of Learn with Libby LLC. I am obviously going to share my experience and how I got through the NAPLEX and how I navigated it. But this session is really for you. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, put them in the link, because I want to make sure that I'm answering your questions and we're discussing the things that you find valuable or you need from this session. So with that being said, here is the QR code to get to the link if you want to do it on your phone. I will pull up the responses on the next slide so that you can see what else is going on. Can you guys still see my screen?
yes, we can.
Okay. Oh, I'll switch it over to this version. So if you guys want to add any questions, I'll give you a few minutes, and then here you can see what questions are being asked. We don't have too many repeats, but I'll give you a few moments to do that. We will definitely talk about study tips and building your endurance. Big topics to focus on for sure. How to know when you're ready, that's a good question. I will touch on reading the full book and what resources you can use as well. Yeah, anything else? Yep, I'll cover all the resources that I used in addition to other ones that my classmates and colleagues used as well. All right. I will go back to the presentation now. So thank you all for putting in those questions because I want to make sure the content that I developed is what you want to know. So good to know that I was on the right track. All right, so for the session, we're going to lay the foundation, going over some of those things that you need to do before you really get into your studying. So focusing on having the right mindset, the resources you're going to use in addition to crafting your study schedule. Then we're going to talk about getting to work, so those study tips and strategies that will help you be successful on exam day, and then how to cross the finish line. So what you need to do before and after exam day, and then we'll do a little Q&A to answer any questions that I didn't touch upon during the presentation. All right, so laying the foundation. I have a little story for you all. As cute as I look in scrubs, and even though I worked in a hospital for 3 years and I graduated with my PharmD, I was absolutely terrified of the NAPLEX because I do not consider myself a clinical girly. I went the fellowship route and didn't feel confident in my clinical skills. So like, how am I going to pass this? I don't know if I can do it. Also, when you get to the end of your journey, which I'm sure many of you are there now where you're just feeling a little drained and you just want to be like, done. You just want to check the box and be done and be like, I'm done with pharmacy school. No more exams, no more tests, no more nothing. And I was there. I was there. I can relate. But it was the thing that really changed it for me was my mindset. And so that's why I want to focus a little bit on your mindset because it truly does make a difference in how you show up when you come to prepare for the NAPLEX and when you take that exam. So that is the first piece that we will touch upon. So these are the 3 affirmations that I repeated to myself as I was studying. I am capable. I don't have to be perfect. And I am ready. And so I say these 3 things because as a reminder to you all that you've come this far, do not throw in the towel now. I know you want to be done. I know you just want to say, I'm done with exams. I'm done with pharmacy school. I don't have to worry about any of this anymore. But you've got 2 more exams to pass, the NAPLEX and the MPJE, and maybe you'll get licensed in other states. But you've got to pass, put in the hard work because it's only temporary, right? You can do anything for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. This part is temporary. So put in the work, make sure that you will set yourself up for success. And then you don't have to be perfect because while it's not an easy exam and it is going to require some effort, it is a minimum competency exam. So you don't have to be a pharmacist for 10 years or 5 years. It's not a board certification exam. It is a minimum competency exam. So know that you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to put the effort in and do fairly well. And then you have been preparing for this exam for a long time. You've had years of pharmacy school experience that have prepared you specifically for this NAPLEX exam. You've had rotations that have helped you gain those clinical application skills. And then with adequate NAPLEX prep, you will be ready. So being confident in the way you prepared and all the things you've done up until this point to know that you are ready to take this exam. And so before you study, there are 3 things that you need to review and reflect on. So that first one being the blueprint. Uh, I think I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if it's just me. Okay, but the blueprint. So reviewing the NAPLEX blueprint, also known as the NAPLEX competency statements, to get an idea of what you will be tested on. So it includes things like how much of the NAPLEX will be calculation based and the percentage that will focus on mechanism of action or generic versus brand names, things like that. So it can help guide your study as you continue. Also, you want to read the bulletin. So the NAPLEX Candidate Application Bulletin helps you understand the process of registering for your exam, what to expect on test day, how many breaks do you get, how long is it, what do you need to bring to the testing center, like your ID, things of that nature, so that you can come prepared to take that exam. And then you also want to get a baseline of your clinical knowledge. So it doesn't have to be anything formal. Personally, I did not take the pre-NAPLEX before I started studying, but I did reflect on the topics that I might not have done so hot on in pharmacy school. For me, that's infectious disease, struggle, and I know that. And so I knew that was something I was going to have to spend a lot of time with. I knew from rotation experience, the things that I knew in the back of my hand when I was starting to study that I might not have to spend too much time on. Of course, I wanted to review it for my own sake, but I knew I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time diving through that material. Understand the areas you need to focus on as you study, and that'll help you build your study plan as well. So these are not all the NAPLEX prep resources that you can use, but these are some of the ones that I'm familiar with, that friends have given me, and then the ones with blue on them are the ones that I personally used as I was preparing for the NAPLEX. And I'll make sure you guys get these slides afterwards as well so that you can have the links to all of them. The first column here is all podcasts. So I use these driving to rotations, driving to work, so I could still be studying while I was on the go, or even if I was going on a walk, get your movement in, I could still be studying some kind of way. I use the NAPLEX podcast, but the one caveat with this one is it was updated 2 years ago, so if guidelines has changed, might not be the most up-to-date resource, but it still does have some good stuff in there, but just be mindful of that. Another one is Core Console RX. This is a podcast done by 2 pharmacists. That's pretty helpful. And then Cram the Pants. which is specific to physician assistants that are taking their licensing exam. But they have a lot of like pharmacy mnemonics in here, and a few classmates had recommended this one to me. And then this middle column here is practice questions. So this is where I spent a lot of my time clearly based on which ones are blue. So of course the RX prep book and the U-Word question bank and videos. I watch the videos to get a nice understanding. Sometimes I find the videos easier than reading the book. So I would do that and then do the questions. The TrueLearn Smart Bank is something that I use as I got closer to the exam, or I was calling it like a review day and I wanted some different questions because I had already done the ones in the UWorld question bank for whatever chapter it was. So I could go to TrueLearn and get some additional questions. This link here, I will say, this is an affiliate link. So if you purchase through the link, I earn placement on it. And then at no additional cost to you, but there is a discount if you purchase through that link as well. I love TrueLearn. It has the difference between TrueLearn and I would say UWorld is that it has a more comprehensive answer key. So not only does it tell you what the right answer is and how like other users did with the question, it gives you like a brief description of the answer. Then it goes into a very detailed answer. And then it tells you why each question option was right or wrong. And then it'll give you a video and like other resources you can look at if you need to dive deeper into the topic. So I found that pretty helpful, especially I was getting closer to the exam. I need to really like hone in on the things that I did not know. Quizlet, I specifically used for understanding the top 300 drugs and making sure that I knew brand, generic, indication, common doses, all that sort of thing. It was easier for me to do that with flashcards, whatever works for you. And there's also a calculations workbook that I used at the beginning to make sure I knew the different calculations, the basics that were going to come up. So I use that again for more practice problems. And then Pearls has a free NAPLEX exam or NAPLEX-like exam that you can do. So I did this one the day before I took my exam just to see where I was at and anything that I need to quickly review. And then Picmonic, it has mnemonic videos that you can look at for just different ways to study, memorize, different things you need to know about drugs or disease states. And then Sketchy and Osmosis, I haven't used either of these, but I know they come highly recommended by other pharmacy students. And they're also video-based platforms that have different animations and things to help you learn the material. I heard Osmosis is pretty good for infectious disease. Didn't use it, but someone said that's how they survived. So just, there's quite a few resources out there. So choose what works best for you in your learning style. All right. So building your study schedule. There are 3 things you need to focus on as you build your study schedules. You know, the length, how long do you want or need to study for? Personally, I think somewhere between 3 months to 3 weeks makes the most sense. But I think 6 weeks is ideal because it gives you enough time to cover everything. You can still have some review days in there, and you're just not as stressed. Life happens, so you've got 6 weeks of time if things do come up. As far as the resources and topics, what resources will you have? Do you have available to use as you study? And then what topics will you need to spend more time with? Just like we talked about, getting your baseline, understanding yourself, and where your weak areas are that you may need to focus on. And then as far as catching up, do you have other obligations during your study period? I know for me, I was moving across the country, had a graduation party, all my family was coming into town. So these are things I had to schedule around. I knew that while my family was there, like I was not getting any study done. That was not realistic. So I had to make sure that I planned for that. Also, on the flip side of that, like where can you give yourself grace to rest or add in catch up days? It's not realistic to be studying 15 hours a day, every single day. So make sure you're giving yourself breaks and you're fitting that into your schedule as well. And then where to add in review days. Do you want to review every Friday? Is that going to be your thing? Do you want to do all your review at the end, like the last 2 weeks? You just want to focus on reviewing. Again, find what works for you. Everybody's schedule will look a little different. I know I'll share some example schedules in a second, but I know for me, I took various different schedules and made it work for me. I didn't follow just one specific one, like the RX prep one or one that a friend had made. I did what made sense for me. So I encourage you to do the same. All right. So these are just the steps that I took to build my study schedule. So again, you'll have these slides later. You can take a picture now if you want, but this is how I went through building my study schedule. So I decided when I wanted to take my exam. For me, I originally thought I would take it before I moved, just so I could get it out the way. Again, life happens, so I ended up taking it 2 weeks later in August. Then I would say, so once you find the date that you wanna take the test or you're aiming for, again, that depends on scheduling, availability, but have a date that you're aiming for. Uh, I would go a week from that and then put in your practice or review time, just to give yourself a little bit of a buffer, but also you wanna make sure that you're reviewing all the things you've studied before you go and take that exam. Then I would insert additional obligations and responsibilities into your calendar. I mentioned I was moving, I had my graduation party, family was coming into town, all those things I had to schedule around. Then I would insert those weak topics or areas first and a lot more time to these. So the QR code here, it's also the same link that's at the bottom of the screen where it says RX Prep Topics list. It's just a list of all the chapters in the RX Prep book. And it's an Excel sheet that has them all listed out. So I use that to build my schedule from. And it has them color coded if you have the RX Prep book and you've looked at the table it has and it says, okay, these ones will take you, you can do this all in one weeknight or a weekend day. You can focus on it. That's how it's broken up by how much time they estimate that it'll take someone to get through them. So I utilize that to plan how I would study. And then once I found like, okay, I went through the table and I found, okay, like these ones are probably would be my weakest areas and put those in my low calendar first. Then I did the remainder of the topics and did what made sense based on like how long I wanted to study each day as well. And then whatever was left over in my calendar, my schedule, I would insert rest days and additional review days as your schedule allowed. And then I'll show you a few examples. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to give you an idea of what's in these links. Might take a little bit. Okay. Shelby shared screenshots of her Word document that she had and like how she broke up studying and things like that. And Mickey did the same. And then RX Prep also has different study schedules. The only thing with theirs, I would say, is that they have 12 months, 6 months, and 3 months. And so I at first used those topics to build mine, but I didn't necessarily build off the 3 month schedule just because I worked in like a 6 week time range. So I think it just depends on what works best for you. All right. So before I move on to study strategies, what questions do you all have about anything we've covered so far? All
Yeah,
right.
I'm not seeing any in the chat. I see people just saying the same thing, not ID, and I've personally used Sketchy and some other things, so I think we're good.
Okay. We'll move on to getting to work, get into your studying, and what that might look like. I have a few do's of NAPLEX prep. The first being top 300 drugs. Would highly suggest that you master the top 300 drugs. Drugs. You want to know the brand name, generic, indication or indication, dosage form, and common doses. I say this because even though you might not get questions on every single disease state, one of your answer options might be a drug that is for that disease state that is completely unrelated to the question that you have. And if you can deduce that because what it's indicated for, and maybe the generic name because they gave you the brand name, but you're like, I know the generic name of this one, you can recognize that might not be the correct answer choice. So I highly recommend understanding and mastering those top 300 drugs. The other piece of it is calculations. So master all calculations, and calculations isn't just PK, it's your bios, stats, conversions, compounding, and knowing how to use the formulas that are on that formula sheet is super, super important. And for me, once I seriously was studying for the NAPLEX, so I'd probably say within my 6 week time frame, I'd probably say once I got to 4 weeks, I was doing calculations every day. It wasn't something crazy where I was spending hours on it, but just 15 minutes a day going through calculation questions just so I could really master them, get fast at it. And I truly feel like that was the reason I passed the NAPLEX is because I was very strong in the calculations section. And then make sure that you're incorporating practice questions into your study time and your prep. So, quizzing yourself is scientifically proven as the best way to study. I didn't include the articles here, but there's lots of articles because if you're working out, you're trying to build a muscle, you use that muscle a whole lot. That's the same thing that you're doing with your brain, right? When you're constantly trying to apply the information, trying to find it and pull it out, you're strengthening those neural pathways and it helps you be able to apply it faster and recall faster. So, making sure you're spending a good chunk of your time doing practice questions and not just reading the book or watching the videos, really make sure you're able to apply the information that you've been learning or reviewing. Now, on the other side of that, we have the don't of NAPLEX prep. Don't selective study. I know someone had asked, do I have to read the whole book? I won't say you have to read it word for word, the entire book. That's a lot. But don't ignore chapters or disease states. Make sure you at least skim them, you read the summary, you do some practice questions because you never know what you're going to get on the exam. I know I've read some of the Reddit posts out there that say, oh, I only studied infectious disease, cardiovascular, diabetes, and oncology, and I was good. That's cool and all, but then what if you had a question about ADHD and all the other things that could come up? So make sure you're at least looking, skimming, summarizing, reviewing these other chapters or disease states as well. And then don't spend too much time on the topics you feel comfortable with. I know it can boost our ego. You're like, I know this stuff really well. Like, I like it here. But truly spend some time diving into the things that make you uncomfortable so that you can go into the exam feeling confident when that question pops up. So don't spend too much time with the things that you know. Also, don't study all day. Like I mentioned before, spending 15 hours studying isn't necessarily sustainable. So take care of yourself. Make sure you're eating, you're drinking water, you're taking brain breaks every once in a while, and schedule those in as well. Another idea is studying with friends. I didn't necessarily study with friends, but I had someone to hold me accountable. I don't really do good studying with other people because I like to talk a lot. But we would check in with each other each day. What topics did you get through this day? How'd it go for you? Just having those conversations so you know that someone is holding you accountable to the study plan you set for yourself. But if you are someone who likes to study with friends, you can do it on Zoom, y'all can meet up. It does make it more enjoyable and again, creates that accountability. Also, don't wait. I would highly recommend you schedule exam earlier rather than later. Once you get the ATT, once you have that and you're able to schedule your exam, I would recommend that you schedule it um, and start studying now. The two reasons I say that is because you don't know what days are going to be available, especially in your location, or maybe you might have to travel elsewhere. Like I moved to New Jersey and I had to take my exam in New York City. So I had to travel 2 hours to get there by train and do it the night before and all that stuff. So making sure that you're thinking about the different scenarios that could happen as you're planning your test date. So active study strategies. Uh, this first piece isn't an active study strategy, but I still think it's very important. Reading, watching, or listening, using the resources that I mentioned before to review the material that you need to review. I think it's good to get a nice refresher. And then once you do that, now you want to move into the active study strategy piece, summarizing what you reviewed, making an outline, doing a mind map, maybe even doing a brain dump. So sometimes, depending on the topic, if it wasn't too nebulous, I would, once my little RX prep video ended, I would get a blank sheet of paper and I would write down, okay, what do I remember? Again, you're flexing your brain muscle a little bit, you're pulling out the information. It's going to make it easier to recall the more you do things like that. It's also similar to doing practice questions. So once I could summarize what I reviewed, then I moved on to practice questions. And once I did the practice questions, always making sure you're going back and evaluating your performance. How did you do? What types of questions got you tripped up? Was it a style of question? Was it specifically the topic? Maybe I need to focus more the doses or calculations for this section because that's not really clicking with me, but I know the treatment. So understanding what do you really need to be focusing on as you move forward. Once you know what you need to focus on, you can go back to reviewing it again, read, watch, or listen, summarize again. So it's a cycle. And so here are examples of how I studied. On a weeknight after work, I'd start studying at 6 p.m. I do top 300 drugs for half an hour, move into my calculations. Then I'd spend around 2 hours learning or reviewing topics, then an hour doing practice questions, and then I got ready for bed. On the weekend, I had more time, but for me, I could really only focus for 4 to 5 hours a day without my brain like absolutely frying. So I did that. So again, starting with my top 300 drugs, doing calculation questions, moving into review questions. So what are the topics I studied maybe the night before or that week? Doing a few of those to incorporate that review. Then going and reviewing 2 to 3 new topics, taking a break, and then going over practice questions for an hour over the topics that I had reviewed that specific day. These are just some examples of how you can study and plan out your time. And then as you get closer to the exam, I would highly recommend focusing on those questions and evaluating your performance. So as I got closer to the exam, I was focused on building my testing stamina or endurance as someone else had asked. So instead of doing, let's say, 25 questions at a time, I did 50 or 75 questions. And then I took several practice exams to see how I was doing, if I could sit through the 200 or whatever questions it was, and really get used to doing that. I'm setting up my environment appropriately, using the online calculator versus my handheld calculator, things like that. And then also evaluating my performance. So after I did the 50, 75 questions, I would go back and look at all the ones I missed. And sometimes it was painful, but I did it so that I could focus on the areas I wasn't doing well in. And I use 70% as my threshold for most topics. But for calculations, I used 100%. I want to make sure that those calculation questions were like easy wins for me as I was going through the exam. All right. Any questions about studying itself? All right. I see Carson shaking her head, so I think we're good to keep going. All right. The finish line. So, day before the exam, do not cram and take care of yourself. That's the point of this slide. I took a final practice exam just to get some comfort with like how I was doing, how I would perform. I reviewed a few more things that I wasn't super confident in, but I didn't try to cram, look at everything, do another practice exam. Like that was it. Um, I made sure I ate a healthy meal, I moved my body, and I made sure I got my 8 hours of sleep before the exam. As I mentioned before, you never know where you might be taking this exam. So the day before the exam, you might be traveling. So make sure that you have everything you need. I brought some snacks with me to my hotel room in New York City so that I could have a little brain break, a little snack during the exam, had to have my ID, my comfy clothes, etc. And then review that candidate bulletin again on what to expect on test day and make sure you have all the items that you need to get into your test so they'll accept you and all that good stuff. And then after the exam, regardless of the results, you have probably studied your butt off. So go celebrate. Go celebrate. Go do something you enjoy because you did it. You did the thing. Also, after the exam, schedule things to keep yourself preoccupied. Don't focus in on, did I pass? Did I not pass? At this point, it's out of your hands. Worrying about it will not get you anywhere. So preoccupy yourself with other things. For me, I had scheduled a trip immediately after. So I went on vacation and I enjoyed myself and surrounded myself with people that I could have a good time with. That was something that I did. Um, but you may have other obligations like taking the MPJE. So now that becomes your focus, right? Put the NAPLEX out of your brain, focus on MPJE. You might visit family, you might have to move, pack, or spend time with friends, etc. From my experience and the experience of my friends and colleagues, your results will typically come around 7 to 10 business days. This is not something the NABP shares about when your results will come. I saw some things from people who, like, reached out to them and be like, "Oh, it had been 7 business days since my exam. Why don't I have my score?" They don't include this on their website, so don't go to them and say, "Oh, it's been 7 or 10 business days. Like, where's my score?" Just wait for it. But typically, I've seen it come between 7 to 10 business days. That's all the content I have. Just a few key takeaways. Remember, with the right mindset, resources, and preparation, you are capable and you can do this. You can get through it. Study, really focus in on those top 300 jugs, all the calculations, and disease states using those active study strategies. And then prioritize your well being. Don't cram before the exam and make sure you celebrate once you finish because it is an accomplishment. And yeah, I always just use this as my question slide. If you want to email me after this, follow me on Instagram. I share other good tips over there. If you want to see what I'm up to, connect with me on LinkedIn, whatever you want to do. But I'm happy to take questions now if there are any or anything else you want to discuss related to NAPLEX prep.
Yeah, there was one question, tips for testing anxiety. I'm worried about not being able to go back on questions and spending too long on a particular question because of overthinking the answer.
I would say go with your gut. And one, remember, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get every single question right on the NAPLEX. One thing that I think helped me is knowing what I didn't know. And so if I didn't know a question, I wasn't really about to sit here and just have the wheels turning the whole time. So I didn't do that. I knew that I had those calculations. I knew those were my questions. And so I really focused on those. I knew I would take the time to make sure I would double check my calculations. Like that's where I spent my time because I felt comfortable in it. But for the things that I didn't know, I didn't know it. Um, the other piece of that is your preparation. If you prepare and you don't go back as you're doing practice questions and you make sure that you're testing like the environment that you're going to be in, it relieves some anxiety because you've done it before. You've already done it before. You've been there. That's how you've been practicing and preparing. So you're ready for that situation. So I think if you practice and prepare like the real thing, you will feel less anxiety when you experience it for real.
Can I just add on to that? I've heard some like timing for each question, like that you should spend 30 seconds or a minute and 30 or whatever it may be on each question. Is that something that you also practiced, your efficiency? I know you mentioned that with calculations, you want to be really efficient and speed. Is that something we should also be paying attention to just in general for the integrated cases and such?
Yeah, I would say definitely pay attention to your timing as well. You have now I'm blanking on the numbers, but I think it's 6 hours for 225 questions. So it's a long exam. So pace yourself, of course, but also know what you need to do to get through it. There's a little timer that you have as you're taking it as well. So pay attention to the clock and know, okay, I should be done with this amount of questions in 3 hours. Knowing these sort of things so you know if you're on the right track is helpful as you go through the exam as well. So that was a really good point, Gretchen.
Sorry, I will have the very last question, hopefully, maybe if someone does have a question. The breaks in the actual exam. So we talked about it being a 6-hour exam. There are scheduled breaks, but do you recommend taking additional breaks? Did you take your scheduled breaks, and what was that like for you?
I did take my scheduled breaks. I used them to have a snack. So when I felt myself getting hungry, I went and took a break. In addition to, I did mess up my breaks a little bit. I will be honest. I guess I walked out with something I wasn't supposed to walk out with, and I did get yelled at, but she didn't make me restart the exam or anything crazy like that. Thank God for that. But yeah, I did take my scheduled breaks just because I knew, excuse me, that you got to take a break, let your mind rest. And so you can get back into it, get focused, all those things. So I would recommend taking the scheduled break. I think there might have been one that came up that I felt was too early and I was like, I want to keep going. I feel like there might have been one where I didn't take it, and I might have taken another one later. But yeah, I would definitely recommend taking breaks. Like it's 6 hours. So it's a very long exam. So pace yourself.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Do we have any more questions? All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. We want to thank Libby so much for her time. Thank her so much for coming out. The slides will be sent out and will be shared. So if you have any questions, be sure to contact her directly with her contact information. That'll be in the slides also. And thank you guys so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you all for joining as well, and best of luck studying. And remember, you are capable.